Welcome to Spiritual Changemakers, the podcast that guides you through tough times with practical tools and inspiring stories. I'm Andrea Thomas, your host and the Sacred Transitions Coach. Join us as we hear from spiritual changemakers who have connected with their higher power and overcame adversity. Whether you are navigating a difficult transition or seeking to deepen your spiritual practice, our podcast provides guidance to help you find magic in the change. Come on this journey of self-discovery, empowerment, and transformation with us and unlock your potential to become your best self. Welcome, beautiful souls, to a new podcast episode on Spiritual Changemakers. I'm so happy and so excited to have Eric today as a guest. I was just sharing with him that I've been trying to get him in now for over a year. So it's happening. I'm super happy. I first met Eric in person at Mind Valley Live. I think it was in Los Angeles back in 2019. I think it was like during when the COVID was starting. I think
February. It was about to begin.
Yeah. And Mind Valley was actually one of the few that still made the live event, because I remember I was having probably like 2 or 4 live events to go to that year, and Mind Valley was the only one that still did it. And I remember your talk, and after that, I have seen you to several other Mind Valley events. I would say you are quite a well-renowned speaker at Mind Valley and author. And for those that don't know Eric yet, he is a very accomplished entrepreneur. He is built and sold multiple businesses. And I would say one of the most famous one that probably I know you for, at least, is WildFit. Isn't it? I know you have several ones, and you also teach public speaking, entrepreneurship. You have several quests actually on Mind Valley, but the most famous one is WildFit. And I've heard about it from the first time when I went to Mind Valley Live, how people were just bragging about it, and sharing how they just transformed their whole life thanks to that program. So Eric, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
I'm glad to be here. I'm glad we finally made it work.
Yes. So please share with us a little bit more about yourself, about your background, and how did you even end up having so many businesses, and also so many different fields?
I think it has a little bit to do with education. Our world these days sort of takes a child and then tries to identify what they might be good at, and then tries to mine that child for that resource for the rest of their lives, right? It's sort of a prospect of just trying to get people to do a particular job. And I think that there's times where that makes a lot of sense. If you're going to become a brain surgeon, I think I'd like you to go to school for 12 years. I think I'd like you to perfect that. I think I'd like you to laser focus on that before you cut into me, right? But I think there are different types of thinking that are more convergent. If we think of education today being, I was going to say divergent. I think if we think of education today being very convergent, it's like taking all of your knowledge and turning it into a fine point. But I think there's many of us that have more divergent ways of thinking about things. And so in my case, I wasn't in a position to go to university when I finished high school. It was a quirky thing about the Canadian system, and it was like, my parents made more money than would allow me to get student loans, but not enough that I could, I just really couldn't go. And that kind of forced me to go into the workforce. And my first foray into work was in sales, which I have to say is probably a life skill that everybody should be taught. It should be fundamentally part of the school process. Luckily for me, it was. I went to a boarding school and we made honey. And so we used to go door to door all over Northern Canada, like Edmonton and Calgary, knocking on doors and selling honey. And so I got my first crash course in sales. I remember one of the other students, his name was Ian Hunter, his dad, Dan Hunter, I believe, he came in and spoke, I think, a couple times over the years on sales. And that would be the first sort of, quote, motivational speaker I ever saw. And the cool thing is he had such an impact on me that even now today, I am inspired always to go and do pro bono speaking at schools around the world. And I've really enjoyed doing that. But to kind of get to the end result is that basis in sales led me into business. And when I got into business, I just simply followed my curiosities and opportunities. I didn't decide when my first business was barcode scanning and logistics management and mobile computing. I mean, yeah, interesting for a while, but that was not going to be my life purpose, by any
Yeah.
stretch. My next business was Hollywood special effects. And we worked on Avatar and Pirates of the Caribbean and Transformers. And that was really, really fascinating, but it wasn't a life's purpose thing for me. It was interesting. Then I did get a big shift in life purpose. And that's when I got a random phone call from Tony Robbins' company asking me to come and teach business with Tony at his events. And so I spent a year doing that. And that's when I realized that the thing I really wanted to do leaving school was to become a teacher. But when I saw the way we pay teachers and the way we disrespect them, in my opinion, and I don't know about every country, but in what I've witnessed, I didn't want to go that path. But now I realized that that's not the only way to be a teacher. And after touring with Tony for a year, and he was unbelievably good to me, and he gave me a lot of coaching and really supported me, I realized that that's what I wanted to do when I grew up, teach. And so now, you're right. I mean, I started WildFit because I've had this tremendous passion about health and nutrition since I was a kid. But then I overcame my fears of public speaking, and I always want to share that with people. And so these days I teach the things that were the biggest breakthroughs for me.
So you are not the believer that you should niche down. What would you tell to entrepreneurs? Yes, because we hear this so much, especially in the online world, that niche down, choose one area and just focus on that.
It's not a black and white situation, frankly. I think that there is a time, like I said, if you're going to be a neurosurgeon, I hope you niche. Mm-hmm. I really do. Although if you're going to be a general diagnostic doctor, I hope you generalize. I hope that you have a generalized view of medicine so that you can do good diagnostic work. Now, I think you can take that same idea out into the world. There are times when you should niche, and there are times when maybe you shouldn't. Now, here's an area where it hurts me that I didn't niche. I do keynote speaking, and I enjoy doing that. But sometimes when I talk to agencies that want to represent me, they're confused. They're like, yeah, but Eric, you're talking about leadership over here and team building over here and entrepreneurship and marketing and health and nutrition. What? Communication, speech writing, conflict resolution? What? Nobody could be good at all of those things is the general idea. But I would remind us all that today, when we hear somebody going, oh, they're a jack of all trades, we see that as a bad thing because, that's been part of this whole education paradigm of monopolizing education and turning it into this convergent, you have to focus in on one thing. And so a jack of all trades is clearly a bad thing. That expression, the jack of all trades and the master of none, is a compliment. It's a doer. It's somebody who can get many, many things done. So I think there's a difference between niching and specializing and generalizing when it comes to your skill set. But then there's a difference in terms of your marketing. And unfortunately, in the world of marketing, niching actually makes a great deal of sense because of the way the human psychology works. It's too difficult. If Apple announced one day that they were making clothing, people wouldn't really, they'd be like, I can't put them in that category. I can't quite do that. If Tesla one day came out and said that they were making clothing, or food, Tesla was going to be making food, you're like, I don't know, I trust their cars, but I don't know. So there is a psychological component to niching properly. But I think from a skill development perspective, no, you want to have a general set of skills.
So it's more about the marketing piece that I hear you saying, market yourself. It's better in one area, but then the skill set that you can accumulate, it can be in various things because anyways, it's going to help you when you're doing business.
Yeah. There's one way I think about branding quite often, and it has to do with a little bit to do with logos. Like when somebody's designing a logo, first of all, they make a couple of mistakes. The one mistake they make is they design a logo that they think is pretty. Well, that's a problem because they don't need the solution that they are selling, which means they are in the wrong psychology to decide whether their logo or their marketing is good. If you like your website, it's probably wrong because you don't have the problem that you solve, right? So you can't be the best judge of it. The other mistake they make is they make them overly complicated. And what I mean by that is that, well, look at the Nike or Apple logos. I mean, show it to a 3-year-old and they'll draw it. It's easy. And that's why they're genius. Because you see, the part of our brain that evolved to remember logos didn't evolve to remember logos. It evolved to remember footprints and leaf patterns. Okay. That's what that part of the brain is for. It's for walking along in the woods and seeing a footprint and going, is that a threat or an opportunity? Is it something to hunt or be hunted by? Or to look at leaves and go, oh, I know this bush. It makes mangoes. right? So if you think about the simplicity of a footprint track or the simplicity of a leaf, nobody's logo should be more complicated than that. It just shouldn't
Okay.
be. And so now when you think about it, now let's take that a little further. Imagine that you completely know what a mango tree leaf looks like. We have five different mango species that grow here where we live, and we know the leaf patterns. So even when there's no mangoes on them, we know that they're mango trees, which means when they come in season, we know where to go, right? But imagine that we walked up to the mango tree and we found bananas growing out of it. We wouldn't trust those bananas, would we? Like, there's something wrong. There's something not right with this tree. That would be like Apple selling clothing or Tesla selling food. It would be an off-brand message. So I suggest that from a branding perspective, it's better to niche and earn the right to generalize with the client after the fact. So how I did that when I first decided to get into teaching, coaching, mentoring, and that kind of stuff, I looked at the three areas that I was passionate about sharing with people. Basically, they were entrepreneurship and all the things that are included in that, health and nutrition and evolutionary biology and that sort of stuff, and all the things that are included in that, and communication, speech writing, conflict resolution, public speaking. So those are three big areas, right?
Yeah.
If I try to position myself as the guy who can do all those things, I'm going to confuse people. Well, on the other hand, what I decided to do was to simply put myself out there as a business speaker. After all, I started my own business and I sold it. I then bought another business, and then I started another business and sold that one. And then, and my business background has been in a variety of industries. It's been in a variety of countries. It makes me kind of unique or at least somewhat special as a business speaker. So I put myself out there as a business speaker, and I got known for that. And people are willing to pay for that. And they were coming to my seminars and they were booking me for keynote speaking, and it was done. Then my clients got to know me quite well. And then they started asking, wow, how did you become such a good storyteller? Or how come you don't do jet lag? You travel around the world and you have all this energy. Well, now we can talk about those other things because I've earned the right.
Yeah, so intersecting afterwards, but you did put first on the visibility business. That was your hat. And I'm very curious, Eric, to hear, like you said, when you started like with some basic businesses. So you didn't know from the beginning, like, that's my purpose. That's what I'm going to do. And I see that so much with so many people that they are starting on this venture of entrepreneurship and they get hung up into having to know immediately what is their purpose. So I'm curious, why would you have to tell them about this?
This whole dream of like, just find your purpose and follow your bliss.
Mm-hmm.
If you're really lucky, that might work out for you. It might. But the truth of it is that, well, let's say somebody in their 20s, the idea that they even think they know what their purpose is laughable in most cases. I'm not saying there isn't the occasional savant or switched on or, old soul 20-year-old that walks in and goes, I'm here to end world hunger. Okay, I get it. But mostly when you're 20, I mean, look, here's a silly metaphor I have, but if somebody's 24 years old, then they are basically a 4-year-old adult, right? They're a 4-year-old. And when you get into your 40s, I'll tell you a funny story. My mom called me on my 21st birthday, 21, it's a big birthday. She called me to say happy birthday. And we're living in different countries. So she called me and then my mom, my mom can be like a little direct sometimes. And so while she's saying happy birthday, she thinks she'll just add in a little direct feedback. And she goes, but by the way, she goes, you are very sharp. You're a very smart kid. And I'm like, oh man, what's coming now? And she goes, of course, but, right? She goes, wait till you get to 30. And I go, what do you mean? And she goes, when you get to 30, you're going to realize how ignorant and naive you really are at 21. You are smart, don't get me wrong, but compared to what you'll be at 30, it's something else. And I thought, what condescending rubbish is this from my mom, right? Okay. 30th birthday comes along. I call my mom. I'm like, oh my God, you were so right. Who was that kid? Do you know that at 20 you can sign contracts and shit? Like, yeah, they shouldn't let 20-year-olds do that stuff. Who was it? And she's just laughing. And then she goes, wait till you get to 40. And I can tell you now, on the other side of 50, it's the same thing every decade. And so what I want to suggest about this is that one of the reasons that people have this whole like, find your purpose and ignite your passion and just follow your bliss. Well, it's because they watched The Secret, or because they've been listening to Tony Robbins, and they've been who I would argue is one of the rare ones that in his 20s really had a sense of his mission, and that's very rare. But they've been listening to Zig Ziglar, and they've been listening to Jack Canfield and John Gray, and they've been listening to these incredible people. But most of those people either very luckily found a passion when they were young, or found that passion later in life. And now you're here, Jack, who's just he's a good friend of mine. He's an amazing man. Just, announced his retirement this year, a loss to the wisdom industry, in my opinion. But here's the thing. When Jack talks about that and says, hey, you got to find your purpose, he's talking from his perspective of the last decades that he's been doing this. That doesn't mean that at 20, you already know what that is, or 30 even. And so the way I think of it is, in your 30s, you should be like looking for an intersection between money, fun, and skill development. Like, look for projects and businesses to start or jobs to take that pay you well, that are going to teach you and help you develop wisdom and skills, and that you enjoy, and probably in that order. But then, you get to your mid 30s or so, and now you got to change the order up a little. After I got to about 37 or so, it became, is it going to be fun? They're like, am I going to love it? Is it going to be fun? And then after, is it going to be fun? Is it going to help me develop as a human being? And does it have the opportunity to make a great deal of money? And then by the time you get into your 40s and 50s, then you can start saying, I know who I am now. And that means that when I have a passion about something, it's genuine. It's been earned by decades of experience. My values are defined. And now to say that I'm here to follow a certain mission, well, I think it's fair. And by the way, statistically speaking, what is the decade of the greatest entrepreneurial success? In fact, specifically 55 to 65. I know that we get caught up in the Zuckerbergs and these guys that started stuff young, and the savants and the unlikely outliers. But statistically, if you look at small business startups, people starting their businesses in their 50s are infinitely more successful. And it makes sense. They typically have more capital reserves. They all generally have greater networks and community around them. And they have wisdom, and they have decades upon decades of it. When you turn 50, you are a 30-year-old adult, right? Like, you're 30 years old of being an adult. Very different than being a 4-year-old adult.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's a very interesting perspective. I definitely have not here, and I love it because it shifts also the mindset now and how we look at things so much. So those that struggle right now, Eric, to make it as an entrepreneur, and let's say they're in their 30s, what advice would you give them?
It's obviously it's very tough to offer a generalized set of advice that would work for every circumstance. Everybody's in it.
You mentioned sales. You mentioned that you started very early with sales. Yes. So for example, they have a hard time selling their offers.
Well, I'm going to say this, and it's a little harsh, but if you're unwilling, unable, or uncomfortable with selling, then probably you shouldn't start a business. And I say that harshly, and it's not true in every case, because I can tell you a good friend of mine, I don't think he's a particularly great sales guy. I don't think he is, but he's a great recruiter. And so he was able to recruit great sales guys and great salespeople. And so he's made that work. So, but the fact is, if you think about it, if he's a great recruiter, then he is a great sales guy. He's just not so good at selling his product and services to people, but he is good at selling his opportunity to the salespeople. So my view is, one of the most important skill sets to develop in life is the ability to communicate effectively, so you don't walk away from meetings thinking, oh, I wish I said that. And, you want to be able to get your words out, craft an email properly, speak your words properly, speak in front of 5 people or 5,000 people. That's one of the most valuable skills you could ever develop as a human. And then an upgrade to that would be to understand the psychology of influence and how to attract people and sell properly. That skill set is in my opinion, is the defining factor in entrepreneurship. It really is. And I'm able to say that not only from having now worked with hundreds of thousands of people in over 50 countries around the world, but just in my own life. Like, my first business, I really started it because my first professional job was selling high technology, mobile computing equipment, wireless networking, barcode scanning, that kind of stuff. And I was very good at selling it. And then when I left that job, I decided to start my own business, basically in the same industry. But I, at that point, had not figured out public speaking. In fact, I was terrified of it. I would avoid it at all costs. I was absolutely dreadfully terrified of public speaking. I wouldn't do it. And after I sold that business, in fact, in the last 3 years that I had that business, I started doing some hobby speaking and I started developing some skills and knowledge. And from then on, when I was involved in business, I was able to use speaking and it changed everything. My first business, it took me 6 years to achieve what we call business freedom. That's where you actually own an asset, where your business can operate whether you're there or not. That's true entrepreneurship. Everything less than that is self-employment. That's the harsh reality.
Yeah.
And so when I started my next business, actually I bought a business and then I started an adjunct business related to it. So I bought a Hollywood, well, it wasn't based in Hollywood, but a special effects company in Northern California that worked on Hollywood production and big production films. But then at the same time, we started another business. Now, this time I was going out and doing not a lot, but I was doing some speaking to create attraction, to spread awareness. And I can tell you it changed everything. We would never have achieved what we achieved in that business without that. No question about it. And of course, when I launched businessfreedom.com and speaking on entrepreneurship, and then of course, WildFit, my ability to tell a story, my ability to communicate, my ability to create attraction is what caused that. Like WildFit was a hobby. It was me sharing one of my passions with the world. I never intended it to become a business. It just exploded. Why? Because I was speaking eloquently about it, because I was speaking passionately about it and creating attraction for it. And it worked.
Yeah. And it worked. So communication and understanding how to attract people and sell. And you really mentioned that speaking can elevate, because you said previously it took you 7 years to build your business, but through speaking, that if you get it, speaking, it's one of the biggest fears, no, that people have.
Yeah.
Like, I think more than that itself.
Yeah, that's an old cliched idea that that Americans were polled about their fears of public speaking, and public speaking was the number one fear, and death was the third fear. But yeah, it is. It's a major fear for people. And here's what's really crazy about that: it's a learned thing. That fear, we were taught it in school. We were basically taught to become afraid of public speaking. The truth is, everybody is born a natural speaker. Everybody is. If you've ever been on a plane with a 2-year-old, you know this to be true. No 2-year-old is afraid of public speaking. But something happens after 2, an overbearing parent, sometimes a father that said, use your indoor voice, think before you speak, children should be seen and not heard, and all that kind of stuff. Or a teacher who put you on the spot in an uncomfortable situation in front of the class. And those little moments as we were growing up turned most of us nervous, uncomfortable, and sometimes outright afraid of public speaking. Luckily, it can be undone in a heartbeat.
In a heartbeat? How is that? How can it be? Is it through the practice? Is it through like shifting your mindset? How do you do it?
There are a couple of different components to it, but the first thing to understand about it is that, think of it this way: are there any skills that are improved by drinking alcohol? No. You don't become a better driver. You don't become a better golfer. You don't become a better tennis player with alcohol. Sorry, it doesn't work. Matter of fact, I was recently on Necker Island and we were playing this bizarre game of tennis that had like 20 people on each side. And when somebody got the ball out, they had to take a shot. Now, I don't drink alcohol, so I wasn't partaking, but I can tell you the people who were drinking did not become better tennis players as the game went on, right? It doesn't work like that. But wait a second now. People do become better speakers after a drink or two. They do. They become more free. They become louder. They become more free with their body. They become better storytellers. Now, after the third or fourth drink, they become dickheads, but that's a different thing entirely, right? But up until that moment, they become better speakers. Why? To become a better golfer might take 5 years of incredible practice and coaching and mentorship and all that kind of stuff. To become a better speaker takes 2 shots of whiskey, or whatever. Why? Because it's already inside, and it is only our inhibitions that trap it in there. Now, alcohol is a terrible way to release those inhibitions. It's a terrible way, but I'll tell you, it's how my dad became an alcoholic. He was a law professor in his 20s. He was terrified of public speaking, and he found that half a beer before the lecture made everything better. Well, that doesn't end well. I can tell you now that doesn't end well. But the good news is that there's a mechanism for supporting people in releasing those inhibitions. Like we do it at our Speaking Academy program. It's a 5-day program. By day 2, day 3, people are done. They're not afraid anymore. And it is one of the greatest gifts you can give anybody, because most people are walking around using a huge amount of energy to control themselves, to not be themselves, to be who they think everyone else wants them to be. And when you give them permission and the experience and the perspective to release, everything about life improves. They become way more attractive in every sense of the word, but they also have more energy. And the reason is it takes a phenomenal amount of energy. Your ego takes a phenomenal amount of energy to hold you in place. And by the way, when I say hold you in place, think about this. Have you ever had the experience where you have a group of friends and you have like one personality for that group of friends, but then you have this other group of friends, say from high school, and you have a different personality from them, right? You don't really think much about it, but you know your one group, maybe you swear a little more than the other group. I don't know what it is, but then one day you go to a party and there are people from both groups. And then it's like, I don't know who to be. Well, that feeling is in us all the time. We only notice it when the groups collide, but it's happening all the time. So if you watch somebody, they're standing on stage in front of a bunch of people they feel comfortable with. They're okay. But then their dad walks in the room. They become a cardboard box, right? The minute you feel that there's jeopardy in the audience, you become as safe as possible. And safe is one-dimensional and flat and terrible presenting. And so giving somebody the gift of releasing themselves, it's one of my favorite things to do, and it's life-changing.
Yeah. And what have you seen as being like the most common fears and limiting beliefs people have when it comes to public speaking? I remember the first time when I was introduced to it, it's when I actually discovered Mind Valley many years ago, and I did Lisa Nichols' quest, Speak and Inspire. And
yeah, speaking is great.
Amazing. And one of the homeworks was like, at the end, it was like, now you're going to go and speak in front of people. And I was like, oh my God, I'm terrified. It was like the most terrifying thing I've ever felt in my life, like even more than having an exam at school. But I also remembered what she shared. And she shared that when you feel the fear, that means there is something for you, because fear and excitement, they show up the same in your body.
All right. I have a couple thoughts for you. The first thing is that, and take this as I mean it with love, but here's the thing. If standing in front of an audience is like the thing that fills you with the most fear of your whole life, which is what you said, then you have lived an unbelievably sheltered life. And you have, because we all are.
Until that point.
But we all are, right? If you think about how many times you will face death in your lifetime, most people will face death once at the end. But a few generations ago, death was a weekly reality people faced all the time. So the funny thing is, we are much more scared now, even though things are safer than they've ever been. And the reason we're more scared now is because one day I was in a casino in the Bahamas, and 4 men with assault rifles walked in and started shooting. That's scary. One day when I was 18 years old, somebody lit me on fire and I couldn't put the fire out, and I nearly lost my arm. I had to have it rebuilt from skin from my legs. That was scary. Now, for somebody who's had those events happen in their life, when the red and blue lights of the police car flip behind them, they don't get freaked out about it. They're like, it's not 4 men with guns. Well, okay, it's 2 men with guns, but they're not shooting, right? Like, it calibrates us differently. So the first thing is that most people have not calibrated their adrenal production very well by just living unbelievably safe lives. So now you put them in front of an audience and they flood themselves with full adrenaline. Well, no. So that's the first thing. But then the second thing about this is that, and it's going to what Lisa said. Lisa's a good friend and I love her program. She is on to a very important topic when she says that to you. Now, my partner, my girlfriend, Kirsty, she's Estonian. And so, and she speaks, Estonian, Russian, some Finnish, some English, some Spanish, like she, multilingual. I'm not like that. I speak 1.2 languages. But when she's speaking English, sometimes she just makes words up. She just kind of uses the logic of her other languages. So one day she goes, but Eric, I have scariosity about that. I go, what do you mean scariosity? She goes, scariosity. Because you've seen this before. Like if somebody doesn't understand, you just say it louder and then Scariosity, she says. I go, yeah, no, it doesn't matter how loud you say it. It's still not a word. She goes, it's a word. I go, look, Kirsty, I don't think I know all the English words, but I know a lot of them. And I don't think if that was a word, I feel like I'd know it. And I go, what is it supposed to mean? No, she says to me, what do you think it means? And I go, well, scariosity. It's probably the combination of fear and curiosity. She goes, see, it's a word. So By the way, it is a word now. Like our whole community
It
uses
is.
it. All Speaker Nation, they all use it. And here's what it is. Scariosity is exactly that. You can graph it. It's when you have an amount of fear about something and you have a certain amount of curiosity about it. So here's a crazy thing. If somebody isn't afraid of public speaking, there's only 2 times that they're not afraid of public speaking. One is they're very experienced or they've gotten over it and it's just the way it is. The other one is they have no desire to do it.
Mm,
If you have no desire to do it, you're not afraid.
okay.
You're only afraid if you secretly want to be doing it. That is scariosity. And then the goal, of course, is to get to the place where your curiosity is stronger than your fear. And the moment that scariosity kicks in, the moment you can push the curiosity, the passion above the fear, you will stand in front of the audience. Now, that won't mean you won't be afraid, but it'll mean you'll take action. And then from taking action, you'll get better and better and less fearful, as long as you avoid one incredible mistake.
What is that?
This is so important. This is so very important. I one day said to an audience that the number one thing that they should consider whenever they're in front of a camera or on stage or being interviewed or speaking or whatever it is that they should be themselves. They should be authentic because humans have a fundamental attraction to authenticity.
Yeah.
This is an unpopular way to explain this, but I would put to you that one of the reasons that Donald Trump was able to beat both Hillary and Kamala is that they spoke from teleprompters a lot. They just weren't authentic in their delivery. And Donald Trump just flies from the cuff. You might not like what he's saying, but you don't have to read his mind. And there's something about like the average person would rather, faced with the choice of being with an authentic enemy or an inauthentic friend, they would choose the authentic enemy. And that's how powerful authenticity is. So I said this to the audience. And then I later said to them, never show the audience that you're nervous. And they're like, whoa, Eric. Sorry, you've got an inconsistency now because you said that we should be authentic. And now you said we can't tell them we're nervous. But if I'm nervous, then it would be authentic to show them that I'm nervous. No. And here's why. What the hell are you nervous of? You think they're going to shoot you? They're going to assault you? They're going to damage you? They're going to hurt you in any way? No, you're not. Nervousness is, and this is big, nervousness, displayed nervousness is an authentic attempt to get sympathy. And here's where it comes from. You're in school and 2 kids are giving a presentation. The first kid nails it. Perfect, well-rehearsed, nails it. We give them an applause. The second kid goes up there terrified, sweating, eyes watering, cheeks blushed out, stutters, stammers, struggles, but gets to the end. What kind of applause does that kid get? Woo! Woo! That kid gets 10 times the applause because of how hard it was for them. And by the way, I've been sharing that example for years, but recently, just a couple of weeks ago, we went to presentation day at 2 of our daughters go to the same school. One is 8, the other one's 17, and they have this thing called presentation day. And so the kids get up and do their lines. Twice in that day, there were 4 kids standing, delivering lines that they'd memorized. And in each case, one of the children struggled, and the audience clapped for them individually. And so here's what's happened to us through school. We learned unconsciously that the harder you make things look, the better benefits you'll get.
The more love and attention.
That habit is what nervousness is. So when somebody goes on stage and says, I'm really nervous about being here, what they're saying is, please make sure to give me a lot of love at the end. No. Now the problem is, you know that at an unconscious level, you know that. So if you show them that you're nervous, you tell them you're nervous, then after the talk, they come up to you and they go, oh my God, that was amazing. It was one of the best ever. I loved your stories. You don't believe them because you know that your displayed nervousness is what made them say that. The only way to get the truth from the audience is to walk up and confidently say, I believe the talk I'm about to deliver is going to change your life. So let's buckle in. And then deliver power and confidence and authenticity. And at the end, less people will say it. But when they say it, you'll believe them.
So true. So true. And I remember hearing you sharing that on stage at Mind Valley as well, and sharing that you want to start with something so bold that people are going to be like this on their chair and are like, oh my God, what is this person going to deliver right now?
Yeah.
Wow. So powerful. Eric, like we talk so much about like success and how to do all of these things. But what I really would love to hear as well is like, when And if maybe you did not have, but did you ever had like a fuck up, a failure, like with your, like, let's say with your speaking, like what was one of the biggest fuck ups that happened and how did you overcome it?
I have to say, I've been very lucky in the world of speaking. I've never had what they call a bomb. I've never walked out and bombed on stage. I've been lucky about that. But I've bombed in a bunch of other areas. I've bombed in business. I've bombed in my personal life. I mean, I have definitely faced my fair share of adversity and difficulty. No question about it. I'll give you one really great example. A friend of mine invited me to go on a tour of the old Industrial Light and Magic film studios up in Northern California. And, if you're me and you were born in the 70s and Star Wars was a thing, then, the chance to go visit the original ILM studios where they made those movies and Star Wars and Indiana Jones and Pirates of the Caribbean, all that kind of stuff, it was an exciting opportunity. I went up there, and when I got up there, I found that they were trying to raise money. They'd spun out separately from Lucasfilm. They were now an independent company, and they're trying to raise money to develop a bunch of 3D technology and all that kind of stuff. And it's a longer story, but the short version is, as a result of being up there, I made the very rash decision to buy the studio. And I did it. The time frames were tight. They were out of money. Their workers' compensation insurance hadn't been paid, and if it didn't get paid by Friday, everybody was like, it was bad. The business was basically this close to going out of business. So if I didn't step in and make an offer, it was going to go out of business, and that meant that I didn't really have a lot of time to do proper due diligence and investigation and so forth. So I step in and I put all this money in and all this time in, and within about a month, I realized that the 3 partners that sold me the business, well, one of them was a convicted felon for investment fraud, but he changed his name. And so I didn't know that at closing. When I found out his real name, which was only a few letters different than his real name, it was Sawicki versus Savitsky. But when I found out his real last name, I realized that he had at one point been facing over 400 years in prison for investment fraud. He was a genuinely bad man. He plea bargained it down to tax evasion and they let him out. But that didn't affect the fact that he was doing it to me again. It turned out that almost everything that they'd promised me were lies. I don't know. I would say the other 2 partners were also somewhat duped by his lies, but the fact of the matter is that I was now in with everything, and it was largely based on lies. And I spent the next 6 months, 8 months in constant fear that I was going to lose everything and have to start my entire life over, business life over again in my 40s. It was awful. And, I remember one day I had this realization that my quality of life was suffering. I really, I was basically dealing with stress and anxiety on a daily basis. And I was married at the time. And I said to my wife, I can't live like this anymore. Every single day we're in fear. Every letter that comes in, we think it's another summons, another thing, another whatever. And I just can't live like this anymore. We're not enjoying ourselves. I said, at the end of the day, I have to do the best that I can to save our situation here, but we also have to have fun. I can't live like this. And so we made the decision at that point that we would go back to having some balance in our lives, where instead of 24/7, I'm working on trying to save this thing. I'm going to work on it really hard, but then we're still going to go see our friends. We're still going to go out for dinners. We're still going to go to the movies. We're going to do stuff, just get our life back on track. And what's really fascinating is I tell you, and I'm so grateful for this, but I found happiness. Despite everything, I found happiness. I was like, at the end of the day, it's either going to go out of business or it's not. And I'm either going to have to rebuild my life or I'm not. But no matter what, I'm going to be okay. And I just had to get to that place. And I'll tell you what's crazy about this. I found that place and I found it was genuine. It was genuine. I was no longer in fear. It was genuine. And then all of a sudden I got invited into a meeting and we were being asked to bid on Pirates of the Caribbean 3. Interesting. Not a big enough project to save the studio, but interesting. Then we got invited into another meeting where we're bidding on the movie Elysium, made by Neil Blomkamp, starring Matt Damon, and it was a huge shot. That was enough to do big things. And all of a sudden, we landed 3 big projects in a row. Now, we can get into the metaphysical question here. Did we land those projects because I changed my vibration? I mean, if we watch The Secret, that's what they would tell us, right? But Eric, you changed your vibration, you changed your manifestation dynamics, and as a result, it changed the world. Maybe, whatever. But I would put it in another more practical way, because I'm a pretty practical guy. And that is that 2 things. One is, thank God I found my happiness before the circumstances changed, or else I might have begun to develop the belief that my happiness was dependent upon the circumstances. And so I'm really grateful that I first turned the corner and then circumstances changed. Then the next thing, and this is big, is that, is it possible that by changing my vibration, I showed up differently for my team and I showed up differently for the clients? And that did have an impact on whether we won those things. I think so. And so I arrive at this, that I lived in fear for months when I never should have. A coward dies 1,000 deaths because you're dwelling on it every single day.
Yeah.
The brave man dies the one. And that shift has been one of the biggest in my life.
Thank you so much for sharing, because I think a lot of people are going to be able to learn so much from it. And I do believe in vibration and in all of energy and all of these things. So from what you have shared, I do believe the fact that you were able to shift your mindset now around your situation, and then your energy, and deciding to find a happiness no matter what in the now attracted those opportunities.
You know, it's always interesting to get into these metaphysical debates about the real world and the metaphysical vibrational world. But one thing that I would say is that winning those bids or those contracts was as much about me being a different person in the room potentially, or what have you, and then it might have been as some strange esoteric vibration I put out to the world. But sometimes things happen almost magically with no direct relationship. And I'm going to give you a crazy example. So, this is a little bit more complicated, but the guys that I bought the studio from, the truth is, the criminal guy, I think what he was hoping is that I would buy it and then it would go out of business and it would be my money and my responsibility, and his crimes would have been erased by the ending of the business. But luckily, we were able to start saving the business. We were like picking the business up. We were getting somewhere. And I think that freaked them out. They didn't want that to happen because that would give us a chance to do the forensic accounting and find out what they really did. So they circled back around and tried to buy the studio back from me. I didn't want to sell it to them, but I had a partner who wanted out. And so the partner said, and he was a bigger partner than me, so he basically wanted out. And I said, all right, if you're telling me that I have to negotiate with them, I will. But I don't think they're for real. I think they're scam artists and the like. But in the meantime, I've gotten out of fear. I'm just living my life. I'm just living the video game of adventure that this is. And so we go into the negotiation, and I say to him, the only way I'll negotiate with them is if they put a deposit down. They get the deposit back if I refuse their offer, but they got to put a deposit down. He goes, done deal, agreed. So we agree that they'll put a $1,000 deposit down, $100,000, and then they have 30 days to make an offer. If they make the offer and we refuse the offer, they get their deposit back. Okay. Fine, right? You're not going to believe this, but at 28 days, I write to them and go, guys, they've come in for their interviews. They've done their due diligence. They've been bad about it. They've blown off meetings. I showed up for a meeting. They weren't there, but at 28 days, still no offer. I write to them, guys, you got to get your offer in. If you don't send us an offer, we're not giving you the deposit back. Like, that's how this works. At 30 days, they hadn't sent an offer. And at 31 days, they still hadn't. And I wrote to them and I gave them one last chance. I said, guys, all you have to do is send an offer. And they didn't send it. Okay. And it turned out that the guy who was managing it was just not only a criminal, but just a disaster. And so the company that was funding the whole thing thought that he was sending the offer, and he never sent it. Mm-hmm. At the end, they never asked for the money back, ever. And I will tell you that $100,000 is the only reason we made it through the next month, which got us through to our big contracts. If that's not vibrational, I don't know what is.
Wow, that's huge. Wow. So all they had to do is send an offer, and they didn't.
And they are the very people, they were the very people who ripped me off in the first place. So you sometimes think like you have enemies, and you go, no, enemies are just people collaborating in a way you wish they wouldn't.
Wow, that's an amazing story. It's, what do you attribute that to? Like, if it's not vibrational.
No, I'm saying when that kind of thing,
yeah,
you got to just throw your hands up. You know, it's like that. If a miracle happens within 5 miles of you, take credit for it. You know what? Nobody could have predicted it. Nothing could have influenced it. We didn't make it. I would have to say that's vibrational. That is.
You did not expect it.
Yeah. And the right came back.
And because you said that you are such a logical person, yes, and you are like very like business oriented and so on. Like, what is your take about like the vibrational and energy world, and how that influences business, happiness, relationships, and so on?
All right. I think that generally speaking, I want to be very practical about my relationship with the objective reality of the external world. What does that mean? It means physics. It means for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, and there's physics. And so in the physics world, there is no bending reality. There is surfing reality in the physics world. In the physics world, it's not that I'm going to change my vibration and that's going to change your behavior. No, I'm going to change my vibration and that's going to change my response to your behavior, which is then going to change your behavior. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So that's the physics version. And I believe that mostly we're here to live in the physics version. That's the construct that we've chosen to live in. The way teenagers do that, they're playing a video game. They come to the hard part of the video game. They don't get afraid. They don't whine and complain. They get excited because they know that and by the way, if they pass the first time, they're a little disappointed. They know that if that level was hard to pass, the harder it is to pass, the more reward they're going to get. That is how we should be playing life. That's my belief about it. Now let's go to the metaphysical version. The metaphysical version suggests that because a particle can be a particle if you expect it to be a particle, and it can be a wave if you expect it to be a wave. And when you get into quantum entanglement, you realize that this particle or wave can influence this one on the other side of the galaxy in real time faster than the speed of light. There is something other than physics, right? There's something else. And it may well be that that's where our vibration has an impact, where the energy that you're putting out, the visualizations that you're creating, the passion that you hold for your outcomes, maybe it does have some impact. I can tell you that there's a meditation that I teach, and it's called pre-meeting. And the idea of a pre-meeting is that before going into a very important meeting, and that could be a one-on-one meeting, or it could be a meeting of 10,000 people in the audience, it doesn't matter. Then I will go into a meditation, usually the night before, where I go to meet that person or those people in a deep meditative state. I go and I meet them and I have a deep conversation with them. And I assure them that they can trust me, that everything's going to be okay, that I do what I say I'm going to do. I can assure them that I'm here to have fun. I have a pre-meeting with them. Now, let's take a look at the pre-meeting. In the physical world, how does the pre-meeting help? It helps me. It helps me to feel more calm. It helps me to feel comfortable at the meeting. It helps me. That's the physical. And if I am more confident and I feel more connected, then when I get there, I'm going to have better energy. And in the physical world, I'm going to get a better response. Physical. But now let's go metaphysical. In the metaphysical world, and where I developed this meditation from is I was doing a course on Hawaiian Huna. And in Hawaiian Huna, they talk about this idea of having, I think they call it an aka connection, but a connection from the crown to the crown of other people. And that your connection goes up into the ether and then it drops down. Anyway, so the pre-meeting concept is built on that idea. So years ago, I was getting ready to meet a senior director of a publicly traded company in the United Kingdom that I was hoping to win as a customer. Now, this is England. So I do my pre-meeting. I go meet the guy. I talk with him. By the way, I'm competing. I'm a $1 million business competing against $2 billion businesses. The odds of winning this contract are very low. But I do my pre-meeting. I go up there. I make my connection with him. I tell him that we're going to be okay. I tell him that he can trust that we're going to deliver, that we're going to take care of him in every way, that we do what we say we're going to do. I drive 3 hours. I get to London, park the car, walk up to the meeting. I walk into the meeting room. And I go to shake hands with him and he gives me a hug. Okay. I want to remind you that this happened in England. Ooh. Hugging I think might even be illegal in England, at least between strangers. Like it was shocking. And I don't know who was more shocked, him or me. I would say that was metaphysical.
So you've experienced both in your business, in your life. It's just sounds more like in general you go more with the physical and bring in some elements here and there about a metaphysical.
Let's say metaphysics were perfect and you could find a way to perfect them. Then that would mean that you could stand on top of, you could stand on top of the Empire State Building. You could jump off it and fly like Neo in the Matrix. But if you were able to do that, life wouldn't be very much fun anymore. You see, the trouble with a full hack of the Matrix is that once you fully hack the Matrix, the game's no longer fun. What makes a game fun is when you play the game within the rules and you find cheat codes, right? And that's what I think metaphysics does for us. They give us cheat codes. Does the pre-meeting work every single time that I know? No, but it works enough that I do it. And so the way I look at it is that the game is the core construct of the game is how we're supposed to play. But every now and again, metaphysics offers us cheat codes. Some people get very good at using those cheat codes and some don't. I would argue Elon Musk is very good at cheat codes, incredibly good at it. Vishen Lakhiani, very good at cheat codes.
Regan.
Good at them too. But I don't believe that we're ever meant to hack it completely. In fact, there's this expression that when the monk or the guru achieves enlightenment, that he just laughs. Why? Because it's in that moment that he realizes life wouldn't be fun anymore if you were completely a god. If nothing challenged you, if everything simply manifested instantly as you desired it. In fact, here's my favorite joke about this. A guy dies and he lived a pretty marginal life, a little too much drinking, a little too much womanizing. He's not sure if he's earned the points to go up. He's worried that he might be going down. And he wakes up in the afterlife and there's no fire and no brimstone and no devils and no Satans. And he's like, oh, thank God. At worst, I'm in purgatory at worst, but I'm not in hell. And then a limousine pulls up, a luxury limousine. And he gets in, this woman, beautiful woman, she opens the door for him. He gets in, she sits down beside him. There's already 2 other women in the limousine with him. There's a bunch of free, open bar. They're pouring him drinks. This is amazing. This is exactly what he's always wanted. And they pull up to the most incredible casino. He loves casinos. And he goes in and they walk him through the place like he's a king. And they walk up to the blackjack table and say, hey, do you want to play? Yeah. And he lays down his first bet. Blackjack on the first hand. Blackjack on the first hand. How cool is that? And he plays again, gets blackjack again, plays again, gets blackjack again. He's kind of done with blackjack, so he goes over to the roulette wheel. He wins on the first dial, on the first, and then he wins on the second one and the third one. And then he goes to play to the craps table. I mean, nobody can win craps all the time. He goes up to the craps table and he throws lucky sevens and everything he throws is perfect. And then eventually, and they keep bringing him exactly the drink that he wants right when he wants it. It's just amazing, this place, but there's something not quite right. He calls the manager over and he says to the manager, something's not right. And the manager goes, what is it, son? And he goes, this isn't my idea of heaven. And he goes, and his eyes go kind of smoky and they turn a bit red. You ain't in heaven, son. If it was perfect all the time, it would be hell.
Yeah.
And so,
it would be so boring.
Yeah, it would be boring. We are here for challenges. And every now and again, we find a cheat code. Excellent. That's super fun.
Mm-hmm.
The physics world is the world that we mostly play in.
And truly learning how to embrace the challenges now and find the resilience, because I think one of the things I've learned about you and from you and getting to know you, it's the resilience of keep going, of facing the fear. But it's not only facing. I think with you, I've seen, and from your stories, is that you present yourself where is with the wild safari. I remember one of your story in Africa. It's like you go where the danger is.
Yeah, I do. It's not that I'm attracted to danger particularly. It's just that I have a real strong curiosity. And if sometimes I have to go through danger to satisfy that, I will. But it's not so much about danger. It's more about challenge. It's more about the perception challenge. Remember what I said about the teenager. Listen, if you want to make a teenager, the new teenagers are a bit different. But if you want to make a teenager from, say, the 70s or 80s, if you want to make a teenager born in the 70s, 80s, maybe even 90s, if you want to make them give up a video game, make it too easy for them. They'll stop playing. In fact, what they'll do is they'll play a game like Halo. They'll go all the way through it and they'll defeat it. And then the only way they'll play it again is by turning the skill level up and making it harder, right? That's what they do. If you want them to stop playing, by the way, why do you think the game companies put ultimate terror mode in there? Because they know the only way to keep them addicted is to keep making it harder and harder and harder. If one day the game companies took out all the ultimate levels and all the hard levels and they just made all the games easy, they'd stop playing. And what I want to suggest to you is we see that happening all over the planet right now because we live in the safest times in the history of ever. We have more food security, more home security, more financial security. We have more connection. We live in the best times ever to be alive. I'm not saying there aren't problems, but for the average person, we live the best possible human existence. A pharaoh of Egypt would give everything to live the way the average person does today. We live the most, and yet we have the highest levels of anxiety, stress, psychoactive drug prescription, and check it out, suicide. Suicide is at record numbers. Why? Because the game's gotten too easy and people stop playing.
So what people should do about it? Like, do you have any ideas that you can recommend? What they can do to make it more challenging?
I'll use a metaphor. If you want more muscles, then what you have to do is put in the materials that your body needs to build muscles. And then you need to take your muscles out and make them work harder than they can. You need to give them challenges bigger than they can handle. You need to make them fail. And if you make them fail and you use them and you put in the right materials, your muscles will grow. So too with your spirit. You have to put in what the spirit needs. And that's all the physical needs of the body, the emotional needs, the calm, the peace, the rest, the sleep, the sunlight, all that stuff. You put that stuff in and then you send your spirit out to get strengthened. You know, I saw Morgan Freeman saying this. I think it was for a movie, obviously. I don't think it was his words, but he says it beautifully. He says, look, you sit and you pray to God for strength. You think God comes down and goes, boom, now you have strength. God says, no, here's some shit that'll strengthen you. You want to pray for forgiveness? I'll give you some shit to forgive. And so what we have to recognize, I believe, is that in the same way that if we want our muscles to grow, we have to challenge them to failure. If we want our spirit to grow, we got to give it challenges. And I believe that one of the reasons we're seeing the stress and anxiety we have is that most people are getting their challenge from Netflix, or they're getting their challenge from social media. They're no longer putting themselves out there. And I'm not saying they got to go fly wingsuits, but they got to do something. I have climbed Kilimanjaro 7 times. Wow. That is 6 times more than is necessary. But I can tell you that those types of challenges in my life, running a marathon or going and living with the Hadza Bushmen or climbing mountains or starting businesses, these things that have been outside of my comfort zone have often really made my spirit feel like it's failing. But I would argue that that's where the resilience has come from. The stuff that I find scary now, the younger me would be terrified of.
Yes. So doing the reps now as you go to the gym, doing the reps of doing the uncomfortable in order to build the resilience and a stronger spirit.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Wow. Eric, thank you so much. This has been such a well-rounded, holistic conversation we've had. And I would love to hear what's next for you. I mean, you've been doing so many things, so many avenues, so many different businesses. Like, what's next for you? Like, what's coming up for you in your vision, in your future? What are you excited about?
I'm funny enough, here we are in January, and I normally do my major planning in November, but I had a number of things that were sitting, you know, a number of opportunities that were waiting to hatch, let's say. And so I haven't done my full-on planning for the year, but I can tell you some of the things that I'm really excited about. We launched our book Post-Diabetic last year. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is getting that out into more hands, getting it out to more people and having an impact. You know, we've done a lot of work with influencers, and I mean like political influencers, senior government people in the UK around really, really having an impact in the world of diabetes. And I'm really excited about that. That book is part of a 2-book deal with Hay House. So later this year, now 2025, The Wild Fit Way will come out. And I'm really excited about that book. That's like life passion work, finally going to get out to see the whole world. I resisted doing a book before because I believe that to create really powerful transformation for people, a book is not that effective. And that's why I wanted to do WildFit as a multimedia transformation. And that's why it's worked so well. But at this stage, with over 150,000 people in over 100 countries having completed the program, the book is actually for them. The book is for the people who understand WildFit and want to do a deeper dive into what we now call evolutionary mismatch and the evolution gap, which is another book of mine. So really that's what I'm headed to. You know, that those are the areas that I'm predominantly focused on. And generally just enjoying myself and time with my family. That's been really special over the holidays, and that's always a great reminder.
Yes, enjoying life. That's why we are here, no?
Yep.
Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing all of your knowledge, your wisdom with me, with the audience. I appreciate you and your time, and you're such an inspiration. And I know a lot of people are gonna take so much out of this conversation. Do you have any final words that you would like to share with the audience?
Yeah, maybe just one. And it's something I think a lot about, but that is to think about how much of your life is lived moment to moment versus with intention? And maybe the best way to describe that is that when the phone rings and you pick it up and you look at the name that's on there, mostly these days when we answer the phone, we're answering it to stop it from ringing. It's not answering it to make a lasting connection. And so if you pick up your phone and you answer, you go, hi. There's a million things that you might be saying with your hi. One thing you might be saying is, I'm really glad to hear from you. Hi. Another thing might be, I'm in a bit of a hurry. Hi. The other one is, I'm really feeling interrupted. Hi. Right? Like it's very subtle, right? But you have these different ways of communicating, and most people do not choose those ways. They let those ways happen to them. And what I would say is that imagine that you took a look at the phone, and when you saw the person's name on there, you took one moment, and you thought about what that person means to you, and you thought about how you want them to feel. Then you might answer the phone a little differently. So I look down and I see that it's, say, a friend of mine that I haven't heard from in many years, and I'm really excited. Wow, I'm so like totally different attitude. But what if it's my partner? I mean, she calls me, say, 4 or 5 times a day for different things. Very easy to get into a pattern and a routine about that. Hey, yeah, what can I do for you? Something like that. But if I look down there and I connect with who she is, and I connect with what she means to me, and I look and I go, oh, it's Kirsty. Then I'm going to go, hey, I'm so glad you called. Now, if intention can change the quality of my phone calls that much, what if we did that for all of our meetings? What if we did that for each work assignment that we were doing? What if we did that with every bite of food that we were putting in? The just taking a moment to bring consciousness to the front and do things with intention changes everything.
I feel that doing this, it changes the need of chasing for something in the future, because you're going to find the pleasure in the moment, because intentionality makes you be present and mindful and really finding the appreciation now and gratitude for what is here. Such a beautiful way to complete this podcast episode. Thank you, Eric, so much. Oh, we're gonna add your contact in the show notes for people to contact you, and your new book, so people can purchase it. I appreciate you so much, and I appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in and for listening. Please give us your feedback. Reach out to Eric. He has so much to offer, as you have heard. So much, like public speaking, Wild Fit, which is all about health. So pretty much a very well-rounded. Thank you, Eric.
Thanks for me. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you, Eric, so much. Thanks for tuning in to Spiritual Changemakers podcast. To stay connected and help us reach more people like you, please subscribe, follow, and leave a comment. Join our community of spiritual changemakers on social media to connect with like-minded individuals and continue the conversation. Remember, the power to create positive change is within you. Keep showing up as your best self, and let's keep the magic of change alive. Until next time.